The autumn wind danced through the trees lining Maple Drive, scattering red and gold leaves across manicured lawns. 7-year-old Charlie Matthews sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, his small hands carefully arranging a collection of toy cars by color. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the room that had been his sanctuary since moving to suburban Denver 3 years ago. From downstairs, the clatter of pots and the rhythmic chop of a knife carried up to Charlie's ears. His stepfather, Derek, was cooking dinner again, filling the house with the tension that seemed to follow him everywhere. Charlie paused, his hand hovering over a bright yellow Corvette, as the hurried footsteps of his sister, Emma, passed his door. Emma used to spend time with him, building car tracks and laughing until their sides ached. That was before Derek moved in, before their mom, Claire, started working late shifts at the hospital, before Emma stopped smiling. "Emma!" Derek's booming voice shook the walls. "Get down here and set the table." Charlie crept to his door, peeking down the hallway. Emma, 12 years old but already carrying the weight of someone much older, emerged from her room wearing her signature oversized sweater. She moved slowly, her shoulders hunched, her face hidden behind a curtain of chestnut hair. Charlie watched as she descended the stairs, shrinking with every step. She was a shadow of the girl who used to cartwheel across the backyard and sing her heart out to Taylor Swift songs. Quietly, Charlie tiptoed to the top of the stairs, his heart sinking as Derek's voice lashed out again. "Can't you do anything right?" Derek barked as Emma fumbled with a fork. It clattered to the floor, and she scrambled to pick it up, her hands trembling. Charlie gripped the banister, his small fingers white with tension. He wanted to scream at Derek to stop, but the words stuck in his throat. The memory of being sent to his room the last time he spoke up lingered in his mind. Later, as the house settled into an uneasy quiet, Charlie lay in bed clutching his stuffed dinosaur. He whispered a prayer, his voice barely audible. "Please keep Emma safe. Please make Derek be nice." Outside, the wind carried away the leaves, leaving the street eerily still. But the stillness was fleeting. In just a few days, chaos would come to Maple Drive, and nothing would ever be the same. The pale morning sun slipped through Emma's blinds, casting uneven patterns across her unmade bed. She sat at the edge of her mattress, staring at her reflection in the smudged mirror. Her oversized sweater hung loosely on her frame, its sleeves pulled down to her fingertips, hiding the faint bruises on her wrists. She adjusted it carefully, as though the fabric could shield her from more than the cold. "Emma!" Claire's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "Hurry up. Derek's leaving in 5 minutes, and you're going to make him late." Emma's stomach churned at the mention of his name. She grabbed her backpack, now impossibly heavy with books she couldn't focus on, and left her room without a word. Downstairs, Charlie was at the table, his small legs swinging as he ate a bowl of cereal. His Spider-Man backpack rested neatly by the chair, ready to go. He looked up when Emma entered the kitchen, his innocent eyes flicking to her face. "Are you okay, Emma?" he asked, his voice soft. Before she could answer, Derek's commanding voice rang out from the living room. "She's fine, Charlie. Stop coddling her." Emma flinched and moved to the fridge, pretending to look for something. She wasn't hungry, but the silence in the kitchen felt unbearable. "You didn't eat much dinner last night," Claire said, rushing past with a mug of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "Honey, you need to eat more. You'll get sick." "I'm fine," Emma murmured, not meeting her mother's eyes. She poured a glass of water and pretended to drink, knowing full well that Derek's glare was burning a hole in her back. Derek appeared in the doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow over the room. "Let's go," he said curtly. "I don't have time for dawdling." The car ride to school was tense, the kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Derek's fingers tapped impatiently on the steering wheel as the radio played a static-filled pop song. When they pulled up to the elementary school, Charlie hesitated before climbing out. "Emma," he said, looking back at her, "don't forget about my art show next week." "I'll try," Emma whispered, forcing a faint smile. As Derek drove off, his hand tightened briefly on her knee, his voice low. "No more excuses, Emma. I won't say it again." Her throat tightened, but she nodded, her voice trapped somewhere deep inside. The clock ticked loudly in the Matthews kitchen, a sound that somehow made the silence more oppressive. Claire was on the night shift again, leaving Emma and Charlie alone with Derek. Charlie sat at the table, his Spider-Man pajama bottoms swinging over the edge of the chair as he finished his second bowl of cereal. Across from him, Emma barely touched her own dinner, pushing the food around on her plate with a fork. "You're not eating," Derek said from the living room, his tone sharp even over the low hum of the television. "I'm not hungry," Emma replied softly, her eyes fixed on her plate. Derek's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Stop wasting food. You think money grows on trees?" Charlie looked between them, his small face tense. "Emma, do you want my cereal?" he asked in a whisper, hoping to ease the tension. "She doesn't need your help," Derek snapped. "She needs to learn how to listen." Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'll clean up," she mumbled, grabbing her plate and disappearing into the kitchen. But Derek wasn't finished. "Emma," he barked, "get up here. Now." Charlie froze, his spoon hovering over his bowl. Emma's steps were slow and reluctant as she climbed the stairs, her oversized sweater swaying with each step. Moments later, the muffled sound of Derek's voice echoed down the hall. It started low, a controlled edge of anger, but grew louder with every word. "You're pathetic," he snarled. "You can't even manage basic tasks without screwing up." Charlie's heart raced as he heard a thud, followed by a soft cry. His hand trembled as he gripped his spoon tighter. Then came the words that jolted him into action. "You're lucky I even put up with you. Without me, you'd be nothing." Charlie scrambled off his chair, his small hands shaking as he opened the kitchen drawer. His teacher's words from last week echoed in his mind. "If someone's in danger, call 911. No matter what, they'll help." He grabbed the cordless phone and pressed the numbers with trembling fingers. The line connected after one ring. 911, "What's your emergency?" Charlie's voice was barely a whisper. "My stepdad's hurting my sister. Please help." "Stay on the line, sweetheart," the operator said gently. "Officers are on their way. Can you tell me your name?" "Charlie," he said, clutching the phone tightly. "Please hurry." Upstairs, another crash echoed through the house, followed by Emma's muffled sobs. Charlie ducked into the pantry, clutching the phone against his chest as the faint wail of sirens grew louder in the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered in his small, courageous heart. Help was coming. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, breaking the tense silence that gripped the Matthews house. Charlie crouched in the pantry, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it might burst. He clutched the phone tightly, listening to the chaos upstairs. Derek's voice was still booming, mingled with Emma's muffled sobs. Then came the sound of tires screeching to a halt and the slam of car doors. Red and blue lights flashed against the walls, illuminating the dark house like lightning in a storm. "Police! Open the door!" a firm voice commanded. Charlie heard Derek's heavy footsteps thunder down the stairs, his voice shifting from anger to feigned confusion. "What's going on?" Derek called out, his tone smooth and calm. "There must be some mistake." The front door burst open, and officers stormed inside. "Everyone stay where you are," one of them shouted. Charlie peeked out from the pantry, his small body trembling as he watched the scene unfold. Derek stood frozen in the middle of the living room, his hands raised halfway, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. "Where's the girl?" one of the officers asked sharply. "Upstairs," Charlie whispered, stepping hesitantly out of the pantry. "She's upstairs." The officer knelt down, his voice gentle but urgent. "You're very brave, buddy. Stay right here. Okay? We'll take care of everything." As officers rushed upstairs, Charlie stayed rooted to the spot, clutching his stuffed dinosaur for comfort. He heard heavy footsteps above, followed by voices and a gasp. "We need medical assistance," a woman's voice called. "She's hurt." Moments later, two paramedics carried Emma down the stairs on a stretcher. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, and her wrists were red and swollen. Charlie's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, the pain in her expression softened into something else, relief. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. "I'm okay now." Derek lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. "You little—" "Enough!" an officer barked, shoving Derek back as they handcuffed him. "You're under arrest for child abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Charlie flinched, stepping back, but another officer knelt beside him. "Don't look at him," the officer said softly, blocking Charlie's view of Derek. "You did the right thing, kid. You protected your sister." Charlie nodded, his voice trembling as he asked, "Is Emma going to be okay?" "She's in good hands," the officer reassured him. "You were brave, and you helped her when she needed it most." As Derek was led out the front door in handcuffs, Charlie watched him go, his heart a mix of fear and determination. The flashing lights illuminated the quiet street, and neighbors began to gather on their porches, whispering and staring. Claire's car screeched into the driveway moments later, her face pale with panic. She ran toward the house, stopping short when she saw the stretcher carrying Emma to the ambulance. "Emma!" Claire cried, tears streaming down her face as she rushed to her daughter's side. "I'm okay, Mom," Emma whispered, her voice weak but steady. Charlie stood frozen in the doorway until Claire spotted him. She dropped to her knees, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Charlie, what happened? Are you okay?" He buried his face in her shoulder, his small body shaking. "I called 911, he mumbled. "Derek was hurting Emma, and I didn't know what else to do." Claire pulled back, looking into his tear-streaked face. "You did the right thing, Charlie," she said firmly, her voice breaking. "You're so brave. You saved her." As the ambulance pulled away, its sirens fading into the night, the Matthews family stood on the porch, holding each other tightly. For the first time in years, the oppressive weight that had suffocated their home lifted. The darkness that had overshadowed their lives was finally being chased away by the courage of a 7-year-old boy who refused to stay silent. The morning light streamed through the hospital windows, casting a soft glow over the sterile white room where Emma lay. Her wrist was wrapped in a brace, her face bruised but calm. For the first time in months, she wasn't looking over her shoulder or flinching at every noise. There was pain, yes, but also a fragile sense of safety. Charlie sat beside her bed, his legs swinging off the chair as he carefully balanced a styrofoam cup of juice. He placed it on the tray next to her untouched breakfast and glanced at her. "Are you hurting?" he asked softly. Emma's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Not as much now," she said, her voice hoarse. She looked at the small clay turtle he had brought her, its lopsided shell painted in her favorite shade of blue. "Did you make this for me?" Charlie nodded eagerly. "For the art show," he said. I wanted you to see it. But you didn't come. Her chest tightened, guilt swelling inside her. I'm sorry, Charlie. It's okay, he replied, his voice steady. You were busy, but it's yours now. He placed the turtle gently in her hand, his small fingers brushing hers. I made it for you because you're my hero. Emma's breath caught. Your hero? She whispered, her voice cracking. Charlie, I didn't protect you. You had to protect me. Charlie's face grew serious. That's what heroes do, right? They save each other. Claire appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes red from sleepless nights. She stepped into the room, hesitant, unsure of how to bridge the gap between herself and her children. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. How are you feeling? Emma didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on her mother. Mom, she said finally, her voice trembling. Did you know? Did you see what he was doing? Claire's expression crumbled as tears welled in her eyes. No, she whispered. I didn't see it, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I should have. I was supposed to protect you. Emma hesitated, then reached for her mother's hand. You see now, she said quietly. That's what matters. The room fell silent except for the faint beep of the heart monitor. Outside, the autumn wind brushed against the windows, carrying with it the promise of change. That evening, back at Aunt Sophie's house where they had taken temporary refuge, Claire sat with a child psychologist who explained the road ahead. Emma's going to need time, Dr. Laurel said gently. And so will Charlie. He's processing everything differently, but his actions show remarkable strength and clarity. You should be proud of him. Claire glanced toward the living room, where Charlie was showing Emma how to use the TV remote. His laughter rang through the house, a sound she hadn't heard in far too long. I am proud, Claire said softly, of both of them. And yourself, the psychologist added. You took the hardest step by removing Derek from their lives. Now it's about rebuilding. Later that night, as the children slept, Claire sat at the kitchen table with Aunt Sophie, tears streaming down her face. How did I let this happen? She whispered. How did I not see what he was doing to them? Sophie reached across the table, gripping her hand tightly. Because he was manipulative, Claire. He built a wall between you and them, but that wall is gone now. You see it all clearly, and you're fighting for them. Claire wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe, no matter what. In the guest room upstairs, Emma turned onto her side, her gaze falling on the little blue turtle sitting on the nightstand. She picked it up, running her fingers over its uneven edges. She thought of Charlie, his small, brave voice calling for help when she couldn't. For the first time in a long while, she let herself hope. Hope that this wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of something new, something better. The crisp autumn air swept through Aunt Sophie's backyard, rustling the golden leaves scattered across the grass. Charlie sat cross-legged near the porch steps, carefully arranging sticks and leaves into what he called his nature fort. Emma watched him from the kitchen window, her mug of hot chocolate growing cold in her hands. It had been weeks since the night everything changed, and while the bruises on her skin were beginning to fade, the ones inside her felt as fresh as ever. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts. Claire stepped in, her face soft with concern. Dr. Laurel's here, she said gently. She's ready for your session if you are. Emma hesitated. Therapy sessions were always a mix of fear and relief. Fear of confronting the memories she wanted to bury, and relief that someone was there to guide her through them. She set her mug down and followed her mother to the living room, where the therapist sat with her usual kind smile. Hi, Emma, Dr. Laurel greeted. How are you today? Emma shrugged, sitting on the couch and curling her legs beneath her. Okay, I guess. Dr. Laurel tilted her head slightly, her voice calm and encouraging. What's on your mind? Emma looked down at her hands, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. I keep thinking about what Derek said, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. That no one would believe me, that I'd ruin everything if I told. Dr. Laurel leaned forward, her tone steady. But you did tell, Emma. In your own way, you showed Charlie what was happening, even if you couldn't say it out loud. And Charlie believed you. More than that, he acted because he knew the truth. Emma glanced at the window, where she could see Charlie's small frame bent over his nature fort. He's the brave one, she murmured. No, Dr. Laurel said firmly. You both are. Your bond with Charlie gave him the courage to step up. And now his bravery is helping you heal. You're stronger together. Emma let the words sink in, the knot in her chest loosening ever so slightly. Sometimes I feel like I'll never stop hearing his voice, Derek's voice, she admitted. Like it's stuck in my head. That's natural after what you've been through, Dr. Laurel said. But it doesn't mean it'll stay that way forever. Each time you speak your truth, you take a little of that power back from him. Healing takes time, but you're already on the right path. Later that afternoon, Charlie bounded into the kitchen, his cheeks pink from the chilly air. Emma, come see what I made, he called excitedly. Emma followed him outside, her sweater pulled tight around her. Charlie proudly pointed to his little fort, which now had tiny flags made of leaves and twigs. It's a castle, he announced, and you're the queen. Emma couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising even herself. A queen, huh? She teased. What's my job in the castle? To protect the kingdom, of course, Charlie said seriously. But don't worry, I'll protect you too. Emma knelt down beside him, wrapping an arm around his small shoulders. You already did, Charlie, she said softly. You already did. That evening, Claire sat with both of them on the couch, a bowl of popcorn balanced on Charlie's lap as they watched an old animated movie. The house felt lighter now, the tension that had once suffocated them replaced by a fragile sense of peace. Claire glanced at Emma, who was leaning back against the couch with a faint smile. There's something I wanted to ask you both, she said. The school district is holding a meeting about new policies to protect kids. They asked if we'd share our story, only if you're comfortable. Emma's smile faded slightly, but she didn't look away. You mean, tell people what happened? Claire nodded. Only what you want to share. It could help other kids going through the same thing. Charlie spoke up first. We should do it, he said, his voice small but certain. Miss Collins says our story can help people. Emma hesitated, her fingers curling around the edge of her sweater. But then she looked at Charlie, at the unwavering belief in his eyes, and something inside her steadied. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm so proud of you both, she whispered. As the movie played on, Emma leaned her head against her mom's shoulder, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, she could see the possibility of a brighter future. Together they would face it, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid to speak their truth. The meeting hall buzzed with quiet murmurs as families, educators, and advocates gathered to discuss the school district's newly implemented protection policies. The stage was simple, adorned with a banner that read, Together for Safer Schools. A microphone stood at its center, waiting for the next speaker. Emma Matthews sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beside her, Charlie swung his legs beneath the chair, his usual boundless energy momentarily subdued by the seriousness of the event. Claire sat on Emma's other side, her hand resting lightly on her daughter's knee in silent encouragement. "You ready?" Claire asked gently. Emma nodded, her heartbeat quickening. She had spent days preparing what she wanted to say, rewriting her words a dozen times. Now, sitting here in front of so many strangers, her courage wavered. But then she felt Charlie's small hand slip into hers. "You can do it," he whispered. "You're the queen, remember?" Emma's lips quirked into a small smile, his words steadying her nerves. "Yeah," she whispered back. "I'm the queen." The moderator called her name, and the room fell silent as Emma stood and walked to the microphone. The bright lights made it hard to see the crowd, but she could feel their eyes on her. She took a deep breath, letting the stillness ground her. "My name is Emma Matthews," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "And this is my story." She spoke of the fear that had consumed her life, of the silence she had hidden behind for so long. She described how Derek's words had chipped away at her sense of self, how his actions had left her feeling small and invisible. But then, her voice grew stronger as she spoke of Charlie. "It was my little brother who reminded me what courage looks like," she said, glancing down at him. His wide eyes gleamed with pride. "Charlie saw what was happening to me, and he did what I couldn't. He asked for help. He saved me." The audience sat spellbound, their faces reflecting a mixture of sadness and admiration. Emma continued, her words steady now. "Telling the truth isn't easy, it's scary, but it's also powerful. If you're a kid who feels trapped, or a teacher who notices something is wrong, please, speak up. You can change someone's life." When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Claire wiped away tears, and Charlie jumped to his feet, clapping as loudly as he could. Emma stepped off the stage, her heart pounding, and was immediately enveloped in her mother's arms. "You were amazing," Claire whispered. Charlie tugged on Emma's sleeve. "You were so brave, like a real queen." Emma laughed, a sound filled with relief and pride. "Thanks, Charlie. I couldn't have done it without you." That night, back at Aunt Sophie's house, the three of them sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the crisp autumn air. The stars were bright above them, twinkling like tiny beacons of hope. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice soft. Claire took a moment before answering. "Now we keep moving forward," she said. "One day at a time. We go to therapy, we lean on each other, and we keep talking about what happened. Not to stay in the past, but to remind ourselves how far we've come." Charlie looked up at the sky, his brow furrowed in thought. "Do you think other kids will hear our story?" Claire nodded. "I do. And I think it'll help them, just like it helped us." Emma rested her head on her mother's shoulder, her body finally relaxing. "I hope so," she murmured. "I hope it helps them know they're not alone." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was no longer shrouded in fear. It was filled with possibility, with strength, and most importantly, with love. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was cheering them on. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying away the last remnants of their pain, the Matthews family sat together, ready to embrace their new beginning. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our latest videos. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thank you all for taking the time to watch, and see you in the next video.